Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate it, and we've had an interesting day. I think a very productive day, and we're now we're going to start a meeting with the president, who we all know very well. He's a brave man, and he's putting up one hell of a fight, and we'll see how that all turns out. But we're going to have a meeting, and we have about 30 meetings scheduled today. We have a lot of meetings scheduled today, going pretty late into the night. But this is an important one, and we have great respect for the fight that Ukraine is putting up. It's pretty amazing, actually. So, Mr. President, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. First of all, thank you for this meeting. Thank you for your personal efforts to stop this war just now, Mr. President. And I have to say that just now our first ladies of Ukraine, first ladies of the United States.
Yes.
Just now we'll have a meeting about Ukrainian children. Thank you for Melania's personal involvement to this topic. And this is very important. I will brief Mr. President and his team what's going on the battlefield. We have good news. Of course, we want to stop the war, and with your help, first of all. And it's good that our soldiers occupied 360 kilometers this month. And of course, we will speak about how to finish the war and about security guarantees. A lot of what to discuss. Thank you.
Would you like to say how you're doing on the battlefield?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. So we, thanks to our soldiers and to possibility to further the program of NATO countries. By the way, thanks to your support, they can buy weapons from the United States. So our soldiers this month they occupied 360 kilometers, and they encircled 1,000 soldiers. And of course, we want to exchange, because we need our soldiers in any case. But thanks to our soldiers, we have this possibility, this opportunity. And we will continue until Russia will stop this war, and I hope that they will stop. In any case, we know that the economy of Russia is not doing well. With this, during this war, we need more pressure, more sanctions. And I hope with United States, first of all, and Europe, but we support, Mr. President, your idea, and I want to discuss it, how to stop some countries from Europe, how to stop the possibility to buy Russian oil and gas.
Right.
Yes. I had a conversation, by the way, with President of Slovakia, Prime Minister. We had a good conversation. I think that they need some alternative ways that they will support this. I'm not sure that Hungarians are ready, but everything is in the future.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Mr. President, do you think that NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace?
Yes, I do.
Mr. President, any update on your talks with President Putin, and do you still trust him?
I'll let you know in about a month from now. Okay?
President Trump, your message
to
the...
Are you willing to provide Ukraine with the security guarantees the same way as European allies?
Well, that's later down the road. We'll be talking about that. Hopefully, we'll be in a position to talk about that a little bit later on. It's a little bit too early to answer.
Why
that
do you
question.
think Mr. Putin is not willing to meet with both of you?
President Trump, your message to President Orban, who is refusing to stop buying Russian oil.
Well, he's a friend of mine. I have not spoken to him, but I have a feeling if I did, he might stop, and I think I'll be doing that.
Thank you.
What progress do you think has been made on ending Russia's war against Ukraine since the last time you saw President Zelensky?
Well, the biggest progress is that the Russian economy is terrible right now. As you know, it's crashing. And that, frankly, Ukraine is doing a very good job of stopping this very large army. It's pretty amazing. You know, this is a war that should have ended in 3 days, 4 days. People said it was going to be very quick, and you got to hand it to the Ukrainian soldiers and everybody involved. It's still going on, and that's not a good thing for Russia. This was supposed to be quick, and so, you know, Russia doesn't look very distinguished, having taken 3.5 years now, right? It's about 3.5 years of very hard fighting, and it looks like it's not going to end for a long time.
Mr. President, have you been briefed on the latest alleged drone incursion into Denmark? What do you think of that? And
Where are they?
Into Denmark. Copenhagen. Denmark is saying that There were some drones that shut down an airport, possibly Russian sabotage. What's your response to that? Will the U.S. have a material
Well, I
response
have
to that?
no response until I find out exactly what happened. I know about it, but they don't know what happened. But we're going to find out very soon.
Sir.
Would you back up NATO allies? You said that you thought that they should shoot down the Russian aircraft. Would you back them up? Would the United States help them out in some way?
Depends on the circumstance, but we're very strong toward NATO. NATO has stepped up. When they went from 2% to 5%, that was great unity. Trillions of dollars is being pumped in, and they're paying us for the weapons that we send. But that was a big day. Nobody thought a thing like that could happen. You had countries that weren't paying 2%, and now they're all paying 5%. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of weapons they're buying, and they're buying them from us. They're buying them from the U.S. In the old days, Biden gave them everything, gave them $350 billion worth of money and weapons. It's a lot of money and a lot of weapons, and we got really not much for it. We gave the money to Ukraine to fight, and they've proven they're very brave. I mean, look, they're fighting, and this is a war going on 3.5 years, and people thought it would be over quickly because Russia's a big military power, and Ukraine, I tell you, they are good fighters. Got to hand it to them. They have a lot of courage, a lot of guts. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Solution and dialogue, because it doesn't solve problems, it creates destruction and misery. As a matter of urgency, I call on every member state to keep the peace, protect the planet and all human rights. Suriname has shown the world that living sustainably together is possible. We are really better together. Thank you, Grantanye, and may God be with you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Suriname. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Katinas Nauseda, President of the Republic of Lithuania. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Dear Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. 80 years ago, humanity, emerging from the Second World War, embarked on a long road towards peace. Building on the solid foundation of the rules-based international order, our forefathers created the United Nations and its institutional system. This system was never perfect. Many nations, Lithuania included, had to struggle for decades, seeking freedom, independence, and sovereignty. Many people suffered war, famine, and premature death. And yet, it was the best international order that we have ever. The United Nations system embodied the great hope that nourishes the human soul and guides our actions for the universal good. Together we succeeded in condemning war and conquest, at least in theory, if not always in practice. To this day, even the worst aggressors feel ashamed to openly conquer, destroy, and enslave. Instead, they talk about special military operations and the need to protect those who frankly do not want to be protected. This shame is a significant achievement of our time. To the extent that current international norms limit the behavior of offenders, they help countless people to survive, escape torture, or even prosper. Thus, it is an ever-growing concern to witness these same norms being subjected to increasingly open and brutal attacks. Our international order is being slowly eroded by the irresponsible actions of those who should know better. The world is turning into a much more dangerous place. We have seen this before. We cannot ignore the striking parallels between the present day and the events of 1938, a time when the world chose appeasement over international law and diplomacy over deterrence, culminating in the infamous Munich Pact. That was a short-sighted attempt to satisfy a dangerous revisionist aggressor by giving away the territory of a sovereign nation. It proved to be a complete failure. The Munich Pact not only emboldened the Nazi regime, but also opened the door for Soviet expansion. Soon after, the secret protocols of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact carved Europe into spheres of influence and sealed the fate of many independent states. As Europe descended into another great war, Lithuania and the other Baltic states were illegally occupied, annexed, and brutalized. After regaining the independence 35 years ago, Lithuania feels a duty to guard the bitter memory of past mistakes. Never again will we place our hopes in appeasement. Never again will we stand aside. Never again shall Pandora's box be opened. In 1938, it was Czechoslovakia that was abandoned. Today, we cannot abandon Ukraine alone. The war in Ukraine is well into its 4th year. The international community has not done enough to stop aggressor. This is a quest that goes far beyond the usual lines that keep different nations apart. What matters is not the distinction between large and small, or between global North and global South nations, but the basic principles of the UN Charter, which guarantee peace and security across the globe. If one UN member is attacked with impunity year after year by a permanent member of the Security Council, what does that mean for the rest of us? When power replaces law and fear silences the truth, the foundations of the global order begin to crack. And then nobody can feel safe anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, the effects of Russia's war against Ukraine are being felt across the world. This war has sparked crises in energy, migration, and food security, while also deepening global poverty, hunger, environmental damage, and climate change. It all began with the illegal occupation of Crimea in 2014 and escalated into a full-scale invasion marked by systematic war crimes. The targeted destruction of civilian infrastructure, indiscriminate missile attacks, and the forced deportation of thousands of Ukrainian children are not isolated abuses. These are calculated efforts to erase Ukraine's identity and undermine its sovereignty and territorial integrity, all in open defiance of the United Nations Charter. Let me be clear, Lithuania will never recognize Russia's illegal occupation and annexation of Ukrainian lands. Ukraine's borders are not up for negotiation. Attempts to redraw them by force are unacceptable. The United Nations Charter is not a menu to pick from. It is a binding foundation of international order. Ukraine is also not the only target. Russia continues to occupy two Georgian regions, destabilizes Moldova, and uses proxies and mercenaries to spread instability across the Sahel, the Middle East, and beyond. These are not isolated episodes. They are part of a calculated policy to undermine international norms and export chaos for strategic gain. Russia is not acting alone. The countries enabling Russia's war against Ukraine also violate international law. They prolong the war and deepen unnecessary suffering. Their actions damage us all, every sovereign nation. Lithuania therefore calls on the international community to maintain strong political, military, humanitarian, and economic support for Ukraine. Having already provided more than 1 billion euros in assistance, half of which for reconstruction and long-term recovery, we are setting an example to follow. It is equally vital that the international community stop buying Russia's energy resources. Without all that oil and gas money, Moscow's war machine would finally stop. If history is any indicator, Russia will never stop using energy for its geopolitical goals. Wherever Russian energy resources flow, corruption, blackmail, and sabotage will follow. Let me remind you, this is a country that understands only the language of force. Ukraine's ability to deter aggression will be the decisive factor in the future. Moreover, peace will never be sustainable without justice. Russia's numerous war crimes, from mass killings and attacks on hospitals to the abduction, deportation, and indoctrination of children, demand accountability. My country strongly supports the Special Tribunal for the Crime of Aggression under the auspices of the Council of Europe. We call on all states to endorse this initiative. Accountability must have real consequences, legal, political, and financial. As a co-founder of Register of Damage for Ukraine, Lithuania calls on all eligible states to join this vital effort. Russia's frozen assets must eventually be used to help Ukraine defend itself and rebuild. I also cannot stress strongly enough that the return of all deported Ukrainian children and illegally detained civilians must be a global priority. We urge all states and institutions to strengthen international efforts and to ensure their safe homecoming. Ladies and gentlemen, as crucial as Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine is, it is only part of the broader global upheaval. Lithuania watches the current situation in the Middle East with deep concern. We join the international community in calling for the full and immediate implementation of the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. To prevent starvation, humanitarian aid must be allowed to reach those in need without obstruction. At the same time, the unconditional release of all remaining Israeli hostages remains a crucial step towards ending hostilities. Lithuania is firmly committed to a just and lasting peace in the Middle East. We condemn all the actions that undermine this goal. The ongoing mediation efforts led by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt deserve our full support. There is no alternative but to revitalize a credible political process towards a two-state solution, ensuring that the State of Israel and an independent, democratic, contiguous, sovereign and viable State of Palestine can live side by side in peace, security and mutual recognition, with Jerusalem as the future capital of both states. Sadly, many states remain trapped in cycles of conflict, crisis and long-term fragility. It is our shared responsibility to support those in need as destabilization spreads far and wide across international borders, regions, and continents. Our attention must also focus on the growing challenge of disinformation, which is increasingly being used to undermine democratic institutions and destabilize entire nations and societies. Lithuania calls on all members of the international community to defend truth as the supreme value and to fight attempts to rewrite history. Historical memory must be preserved. Ladies and gentlemen, as we face high global uncertainty, one choice remains entirely clear. Either we will repeat the mistakes of history, or we will find the resolve to defend the core principles of the United Nations. Today, Lithuania chooses to act. We call on the international community to respond to today's challenges with unity and determination. We call on the United Nations to return to its founding purpose, to prevent the scourge of war, to protect human dignity, and to uphold the rights of nations large and small. Together, we must ensure that no permanent seat on the Security Council grants any state permanent impunity. We must support those who defend the very principles of the UN Charter. In this spirit, I welcome the Secretary General's UNAT reform agenda, a timely blueprint for adapting this institution to the realities of today's world. His call for a more inclusive, effective, and accountable United Nations deserves our broad support. Lithuania stands firmly behind these efforts to reimagine multilateralism. We call on all states to strengthen our collective ability to act across all three pillars: peace and security, human rights, and development. Our message must be simple and straightforward. Aggression cannot win, and the principles of the UN Charter must prevail. Let us rise to the demands of this moment. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Lithuania. the Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Marcelo Rebelo da Sousa, the President of the Portuguese Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, symbolic moment this one for United Nations, the celebration of 80 years, and for us, Portuguese, 70 years of membership. The time of judgment, of compromise, of renewal, multilateral ambition. Portugal is today what always aspired to be, an open country to the world, listening, dialoguing, building bridges, deeply multilateralist and guided by the Charter of United Nations. A world with more cooperation and respect for international law is safer, more predictable, stable, peaceful, prosperous, plural, representative, and able to respond collectively to global challenges. 70 years ago, we were living still in dictatorship. And we found in this community the space to rediscover the real values and contributing to global solutions. And even now, in a changed world, fragmented, polarized, unpredictable, this community is a key community to defend basic principles of a coexistence between nations, cultures, civilizations. And it is with this coherence and the sense of responsibility, with the conscience of the need of contributing, acting and deciding, guided by values and principles, that will be candidates to the Security Council in 27-28, a decision we formalized in 2013. Excellencies, let me pay tribute to the former President of the General Assembly for his support to the adoption of the Pact for the Future. Let me congratulate the present President of this session, wishing the success in her term. But I would very specifically, and in Portuguese this time, say a word about the remarkable work of the Secretary-General António Guterres. O seu humanismo, his humanism, o apego ao direito internacional, his attachment to international law, as reformas por que tem lutado, the reforms that he's been defending since 2017, que inclui agora o UN 80, o Pacto para o Futuro, UN 80 and the Pact for the Future, são a sua marca e o seu legado. They are his mark and legacy. It is a pride for me, é orgulho para mim, having a Portuguese as Secretary-General of the United Nations, ter português como Secretário-Geral das Nações Unidas. Someone that is projecting a Portuguese way of acting in international relations. Uma forma portuguesa de estar nas relações internacionais. He will always be supported by Portugal. Contará sempre com o apoio de Portugal. And I must congratulate him for his speech. Because he said, I will never give up. I know him ever since we were teenagers. He never gave up, ever. And he's right. It's true we live at a time of multiple crises and persistent crises. Division, polarization, violations of international law, cleavage between power exercise and responsibility, technology and ethics, urgency of crisis and capacity of response and action. United Nations faces an existential moment. Without change, without renewal, the United Nations will be marginalized, and we could be left to the law of force. No G1, no G2, no G3, no G1+1 1 plus 2 or 2 plus 1 will be an alternative. No absence of multilateralism will avoid the need of multilateralism. The world is multipolar, will be multipolar. Just think of the situation in Ukraine or the situation in Middle East. In Ukraine, for years, and now for months, for 8 months, one is waiting the mediation of the most powerful in the world. Do we have a ceasefire? No, we don't. In the case of Middle East, we waited and waited for the intervention of the most powerful in the world. Did we have a ceasefire? Without the multipolar, multilateral intervention of so many countries, here in New York, with the recognition of the existence of the state of Palestine, some Europeans, others non-Europeans, we won't change soon. This means we need United Nations, we need multilateralism, we need dialogue between countries from every continent. And the same for international law. We need international law. We need international law for the reform of United Nations. We need international law as a foundation of peace and justice. A world governed by rules is a safer and more predictable and equitable world. We need a Charter of United Nations as a common compass. Of course, we must adjust United Nations, but we must never forget the lesson of the League of Nations. When one forgets the principles, when one abandons the principles on account of pure realpolitik, I mean the power or the powers of the moment, one forgets that no power is eternal. No personality is eternal. Empires went up and went down. We know by experience it. Colonial empires, European empires inside Europe, all kinds of empires went up and went down. We believe that in the reform of United Nations, we have 3 pillars: prevention, partnership, and protection. Preemptive action before the conflict, not just afterwards. Mediation, preventive diplomacy, intervention of the Secretary General and of the PBC. Avoiding destruction and institution collapse. Building peace, fighting against the deep causes of violence, promoting resilient and peaceful societies. But development, peace building without development, preventive action without development, doesn't work. We co-presided, together with an African partner, Burundi, the preparation of the 4th conference on financing of development. Ideas, dialogue, determination, results. Without sustainable development, no lasting peace is possible. Never forget to implement the 2030 agenda and the reform of the international financial architecture. It's a priority involving the digital, the space, the artificial intelligence technologies as force for peace, not tools for domination. Bridging the digital and technological divides as central to build resilient societies. C'est aussi très fier que nous partageons la priorité des océans, la priorité du changement du climat. On peut parler contre le changement du climat, mais on admet tout de suite qu'il y a ce changement. Et c'est pourquoi on a préparé l'UNOC 2 à Lisbonne. On a été à l'UNOC 3 à Nice. On a renouvelé notre compromis avec la protection des océans. Des premiers États européens à ratifier le traité BBNG. Protégeant 27% de notre surface maritime, juste à une distance de 3% de l'objectif en 2030. Excellencies, speaking of the appeal of partnership, the United Nations must deepen partnerships, strategic partnerships with regional organizations. Portugal has experience that is very specific. Nós temos a experiência da comunidade de países de língua portuguesa, the experience of the Portuguese-speaking community, present in 9 countries, 4 continents, 1 language, presentes em 9 países, 4 continentes, uma língua, uma plataforma com voz própria na ONU. Nós acolhemos o Fórum Global da Aliança das Civilizações. We received the Forum for the Alliance of Civilizations. Also, the UN Conference on Racism. Portugal organizou a primeira conferência da ONU sobre racismo. E promovemos a aplicação da Declaração de Durban em todo o mundo. Nós outros formamos parte da comunidade ibero-americana. Portugal se siente hermano de América Latina, compartiendo prioridades comunes como el multilateralismo inclusivo, el desarrollo sostenible y la cohesión social. A nossa parceria, our partnership with the Global South, is made of respect and solidarity. Lançamos as primeiras cimeiras União Europeia e União Africana. We have had the initiative of the first and second summits between European Union and the African Union. We cooperate actively with the PMA, CITES, and LLDC. At the same time, we think that protecting means also protecting the role of women, youth as agents of change, the access to education, leadership, political participation. The world needs more women and more youngest as leaders in the procedures of decision. Third pillar, protection. We participate for 65 years in peacekeeping. Thousands of armed forces and security forces participated in 25 missions in 4 continents, mostly in Africa. Peacekeeping now with 4 peace operations, a quick reaction force, punctual payment, example of intervention in every continent, defense of a predictable and stable financing, including for the missions that are promoted by Security Council or accepted by Security Council, but initiative of African Union. This year, we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the additional protocol to the Convention of Rights of Children involved in armed conflicts. It's a drama. It's a drama. Children going on being victims in every war scenario. We have the legal duty, the political and the moral duty of protecting them. And then, of course, humanitarian international law. One spoke of it, about the situation in areas of conflict. Geneva Conventions are not suggestions. They involve duties. We participated in the 6th Commission preparing the Convention on Crimes Against Humanity. Human rights. Human rights. Human rights mean personal rights, political rights, freedom of expression, economic rights, social, cultural rights, universal, interdependent, and inseparable. Não podemos ficar indiferentes. We cannot be indifferent concerning major crises. We just declared our decision of recognizing the state of Palestine. In the Middle East, now we think that the following step is creating conditions for a ceasefire, immediately releasing the hostages, humanitarian assistance, but also creating political, economic, and social conditions to strengthen the solution of two sovereign states, rebuilding economies and societies, giving an opportunity to peace, to the daily life of Israelis and Palestinians, so that they can live, not die. Live, not die. In Ukraine, sovereignty, independence, and integrity with global total ceasefire, immediate and unconditional, first step for a fair peace, respecting international law and respecting the Charter of the United Nations. In Sudan, intervening to react much more quickly to perhaps the greatest humanitarian catastrophe in Africa. En Haïti, où les souffrances de la population ne sont plus tenables, face aux atrocités barbares des gangs criminels et le recrutement d'enfants soldats, une assistance décisive de l'ONU à la mission multinationale de soutien à la sécurité avant qu'il ne soit trop tard. Excelências, no momento em que assistimos ao maior número de conflitos armados desde a criação das Nações Unidas, estamos disponíveis para assumir responsabilidades acrescidas como uma voz global no Conselho de Segurança. Com a experiência de uma história de serviço, com as lições aprendidas nas últimas décadas, com a proximidade com todos os Estados aqui representados, sem discriminações. E por isso, no Conselho de Segurança, agiremos prevenindo, criando parcerias e protegendo, defendendo a reforma do Conselho de Segurança, tornando mais representativo e eficaz, refletindo a geopolítica do século XXI e não a de 1945, com presença africana permanente, CIDs representados e reconhecimento de grandes potências emergentes como o Brasil e a Índia, com mais transparência, Conselho mais plural e coerente com a letra e espírito da Carta. Em 2024, o Conselho reuniu mais vezes do que desde 1989 e, no entanto, tendo reunido mais vezes, menos deliberações aprovou e mais vetou deliberações, mesmo implicando o sofrimento de pessoas concretas em todo o mundo. É incompreensível que o uso do veto continue a paralisar decisões essenciais perante o sofrimento humano. A Carta é clara. Uma parte no conflito não pode ser juiz no próprio caso. Portugal apoia o Código de Conduta do Grupo ACT, as medidas de restrição ao uso do veto, todas as iniciativas que reforcem a transparência e a prestação de contas dentro do Conselho. Excellencies, a last word. Portugal is presenting itself to the Security Council without hidden agendas, but rather with an agenda aligned with the values and objectives of the UN, with humility, but with confidence. contributing to a council that is more effective, representative, and close to those who expect protection from it. We are a predictable country, a bridge builder, a reliable partner, an uncompromising defender of the UN Charter. It is in this spirit that we want to serve, that we reaffirm our commitment to the United Nations today, and that we hope will earn your trust for the future of the United Nations, but mostly for the future of the world, more peaceful, more just, more respectful of dignity, human dignity, in so many conflicts that represent a shame for all of us. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank His Excellency, the President of the Portuguese Republic. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Yomandu Usi, President of the Eastern Republic of Uruguay. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Señora Presidenta de la Asamblea General, señor Secretario General, señores y señoras jefas y jefes de Estado y de Gobierno, señores representantes de organismos internacionales, delegaciones oficiales, señores y señoras. Vengo de una república situada al oriente del río Uruguay que el mapa, la historia y la cultura ubican en una pequeña esquina del sur del mundo. Un país pradera con balcón al mar, donde la tranquilidad y hospitalidad de su gente es una de sus principales señas de identidad. Vengo de un país donde ya es práctica corriente que un presidente concurra a países vecinos acompañado por sus antecesores o con sus antecesores de otros partidos políticos. Un país donde la alternancia de los partidos en un gobierno no se traduce en una crisis de carácter institucional. Es más, esa alternancia se constituye en un acto de pura normalidad. Vengo de un país cuyo presidente puede caminar sin custodia entre la gente, puede disfrutar de un partido de fútbol en una tribuna como un hincha más. Vengo de un país cuyos partidos políticos, casi todos ellos con más de medio siglo de historia, siempre están dispuestos a acordar soluciones nacionales a urgencias también nacionales. Soluciones, como decimos nosotros, a la uruguaya. Con estos gestos quiero expresar que Uruguay lleva en su vida cotidiana una vocación profunda de paz y de respeto. Vivo en un país, por supuesto, que no está a las puertas del paraíso, porque enfrenta nuevos desafíos en términos de pobreza infantil, seguridad pública o desigualdad social. Y sobre estos temas también hay en líneas generales un consenso nacional. La histórica solidez institucional y política ha permitido que Uruguay aún se destaque en la región por su alto nivel de desarrollo humano o sus políticas de distribución del ingreso, y que sea un país de reglas estables, donde los contratos se cumplen, donde se honran los compromisos internacionales, donde la estabilidad macroeconómica es una política de Estado. Pero esta acumulación positiva también se expresa más allá de nuestras fronteras, porque Uruguay es reconocido en el mundo por su vocación de paz, su incansable lucha en pos de la solución pacífica de los conflictos, su respeto irrestricto al derecho internacional como a la mayor garantía para la soberanía de los pueblos y por ser una tierra fraterna y hospitalaria con los migrantes de todas las latitudes. Desde ese pequeño país que cultiva la tolerancia y el diálogo y cultiva el acuerdo como clave histórica de convivencia y que está inserto en un continente sin conflictos ni guerra entre estados, venimos a esta asamblea a sumar esfuerzos para contribuir con la estabilidad y la paz en el mundo cada vez más convulsionado y desafiante. La creciente tensión geopolítica y el aumento de conflictos, sumados al desfinanciamiento de los esfuerzos por un orden global pacífico y basado en reglas, plantea enormes retos a escala planetaria. Para ejemplificarlo, basta mencionar algunos datos. Según el Índice Global de Paz de 2025, en 2023 hubo 59 conflictos interestatales, el número más alto desde el fin de la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Para el 2024, el gasto militar global sufrió un aumento de casi un 10% en términos reales comparado con 2023, lo que representa el mayor incremento anual desde el fin de la Guerra Fría. Estamos hablando de un gasto militar de 2.7 o 2,7 millones de dólares. No solo se trata de un mayor aumento de conflictividad entre naciones, ni de un gasto militar que crece aceleradamente para sustentarlo. Se trata también de nuevas formas de crueldad y muerte que están adquiriendo las guerras actuales. Sabemos bien que desde el nacimiento mismo de las civilizaciones, la ausencia de violencia o la ausencia de guerra es quizás una quimera. Pero en nuestros días, los avances tecnológicos aplicados han desencadenado otras lógicas mucho más perversas, como el uso de prácticas militares destinadas a sembrar el miedo, el terror y la muerte en la población civil. Que quede muy claro, condenamos toda forma de terrorismo, ya que constituye, entre otras cosas, una despreciable actitud de cobardía. Existe otra lógica actual, y es la que nos lleva a que el objeto central o el objetivo central en las guerras actuales pareciera ser la práctica sistemática del exterminio. El fin nunca justificó los medios. Debemos desterrar aquel viejo precepto de que la guerra es la continuación de la política por otros medios. Toda guerra es criminal, sin importar dónde ocurra, sin importar el Dios que se invoque para justificarla, y merecerá siempre nuestra más visceral condena. Es cierto que toda nación tiene el derecho a un territorio y a un gobierno propios. Es cierto que tiene derecho a establecer un nivel de autodeterminación que le permita la convivencia con los demás pueblos. Eso es real. Y el valor de las Naciones Unidas es justamente garantizar que estos principios se concreten de manera pacífica y civilizada. Ningún Estado que se precie de democrático y de vivir bajo el mandato del derecho internacional puede, aún bajo el legítimo derecho de defenderse contra el terrorismo, ejercer la barbarie sobre ninguna población civil, menos aún contra personas especialmente vulnerables e indefensas. Desde 1948, Uruguay ha mantenido una posición coherente y firme que va en línea con los principios de autodeterminación y coexistencia pacífica. Y bien conocidas son nuestras posturas históricas con respecto a los principales conflictos a escala mundial, en especial el que se desarrolla en Oriente Medio. Siempre Uruguay sostuvo la posición: dos naciones, dos pueblos, dos estados. Y en este sentido, además, el gobierno uruguayo toma muy en serio los informes que desde la comunidad internacional se elaboran en referencia a los territorios palestinos e instamos a implementar las recomendaciones formuladas por la ONU e instamos a la suspensión inmediata de las operaciones militares, a la suspensión de las muertes de civiles inocentes e instamos a la liberación de los rehenes. En nuestro mundo también persisten y se agravan otros dramas más extendidos y permanentes, a tal punto que la Declaración Universal de Derechos Humanos, votada en el marco de esta Asamblea hace ya 77 años, constituye un manifiesto revolucionario ante los tiempos que estamos viviendo. Empezando por su artículo primero que proclama: todos los seres humanos nacen libres e iguales en dignidad y derechos y, dotados como están de razón y conciencia, deben comportarse fraternalmente los unos con los otros. ¿Cuán lejos estamos de nuestros propios principios y compromisos cuando vemos que la distancia entre quienes más tienen y quienes más sufren es cada vez mayor? ¿Cuán lejos estamos cuando observamos que los principios de libertad e igualdad están cada vez más divorciados y que se suele hablar mucho más de un supuesto individuo libre que de sociedades igualitarias en términos de ingresos o goce de derechos? ¿Cuán lejos estamos del sentido humano cuando olvidamos que nuestra principal vocación debe ser estar del lado de las mayorías, poniendo oído ante cada problema o angustia de nuestros pueblos y entendiendo incluso y fundamentalmente al que piensa distinto? Señora Presidenta, vengo de un país con una tradición a prueba de toda trazabilidad y archivo en materia de política internacional. Esa tradición incluye un firme apoyo al multilateralismo en todas sus facetas, política, económica, cultural, como la mejor y única forma de enfrentar los desafíos a los que hacía referencia. También incluye, por supuesto, el compromiso permanente con el derecho internacional, la apuesta al diálogo y la construcción de la paz, como una de nuestras mayores contribuciones en el contexto de un mundo fragmentado y polarizado. Todo el sistema político de mi país se enorgullece de contribuir decisivamente en tareas globales, como el mantenimiento de la paz y la seguridad internacionales, la consolidación y el desarrollo del derecho internacional mediante la participación en ámbitos de elaboración normativa y cortes internacionales, con el apoyo al desarme, la seguridad alimentaria, la salud global y el compromiso con el cambio climático. En este contexto, quiero destacar especialmente un compromiso histórico de mi país con el sistema multilateral de mantenimiento de la paz. En los últimos 35 años, y de manera ininterrumpida, Uruguay ha desplegado batallones en diversas operaciones de paz de las Naciones Unidas. A tal punto hemos asumido esta tarea que nos hemos convertido en el principal país de América Latina y el segundo per cápita a nivel mundial en contribuir a este tipo de misiones. Pero además, lo hemos hecho con una particularidad, porque nuestros contingentes se han especializado en la función más emblemática que llevan adelante estas operaciones de paz: la protección de civiles en conflictos armados. Bien saben las naciones que integran esta asamblea que mi pequeño país está muy lejos de caracterizarse por su poderío militar o su predominio económico. Y es allí, paradojalmente, que reside nuestra fortaleza, porque somos incapaces de estorbar a nadie. Por el contrario, nuestra fortaleza radica en capacidades intangibles, pero que este mundo mucho necesita, porque somos un país muy confiable en la promoción del diálogo y de la paz. En primer lugar, porque estos principios nos definen como república y se expresan en el respeto a la separación de poderes y el Estado de Derecho, la fortaleza del sistema democrático y el respeto y promoción de los derechos humanos y la equidad social, entre otros. Y en segundo lugar, porque esa ha sido nuestra conducta histórica en los foros internacionales. Ya en 1907, por ejemplo, mi país llevó una postura firme a la Conferencia de La Haya sobre el arbitraje como mecanismo esencial y obligatorio para resolver los conflictos entre Estados. Unos años después, 1921, Uruguay fue el primer Estado del mundo en aceptar la jurisdicción de la Corte Permanente de Justicia Internacional, predecesora de la Corte Internacional de Justicia. En función de estos y otros antecedentes históricos, me permito afirmar que Uruguay está en condiciones inmejorables de ofrecerse al mundo como un anfitrión de negociaciones, como promotor de redes de diálogo y mediación que conduzcan a la construcción de la paz y prevención de conflictos. Créanme que estamos preparados para este reto cada vez más urgente, para este reto cada vez más necesario. Entre otras razones, porque aprendimos, como dijo el presidente de mi país, José Mujica, que la tolerancia es el fundamento para poder vivir en paz. Muchas gracias.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Eastern Republic of Uruguay. The Assembly will hear an address by Her Excellency Natasha Pirc-Musar, the President of the Republic of Slovenia. I request protocol to escort Her Excellency and invite her to address the Assembly.
Madam President, please accept my warmest congratulations on your election at this historic 80th anniversary of the United Nations. Your election underscores the vital importance of including women in the decision-making process. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, in 1945, the end of the Second World War was greeted with celebrations, and hopes were placed in a new era of peace and cooperation, embodied by the creation of the United Nations. However, those hopes were soon overshadowed by the onset of the Cold War. When it ended in 1991, we once again dared to believe that this would pave the way to the vision of lasting peace, security and cooperation as enshrined in the UN Charter. Sadly, that vision has not materialized. In fact, the situation has worsened, and here is why. Firstly, the Security Council, envisioned as the very pillar of collective security, is failing to meet the expectations of the world, if it ever has. The Permanent Five were supposed to be role models for the rest of the world working for peace. Some work in their own interests instead. Secondly, the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals is faltering. Progress is lagging, and with cuts in development assistance, millions of the world's poorest are pushed further away from the access to even the most basic services. Thirdly, international law appears to stand at the precipice of irrelevance. The independence of elected international judges, the integrity of human rights institutions, personal security of human rights defenders, and the authority of this organization are under siege. Fourthly, the Genocide Convention risks becoming a relic of the past. Some states have put the International Criminal Court to its greatest challenge ever. Its prosecutors, whose only duty is the pursuit of justice, and its judges, whose responsibility is to uphold the law, our international law, now face sanctions and intimidation. as if the states that sanction them would prefer to shield the alleged perpetrators of atrocities rather than confront the truth and help deliver justice. Fifthly, the landmark opinion of the International Court of Justice affirming that international law obliges states to prevent harming the climate already feels obsolete. And finally, states are withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, from the Ottawa Treaty, and from the UN agencies, or simply cutting their finances. Each such act chips away at the support for multilateralism, a system designed not for the powerful few, but for the benefit of all of us. Madam President, how are we to explain these trends to our electorates, to our people, and above all, to our children? Shall we tell them that this is the new normal, that might makes right, that the strong may seize what they want because they can, that they can kill with impunity because they can, that they may pollute, wage wars, and trample on international law just because they can? Are we prepared to look our children in the eyes and say, "This is the world you will inherit and there is nothing we can do about it"? With the adoption of the Pact for the Future last year, we have charted a path toward a stronger, more forward-looking United Nations. But we must now create the conditions to fulfill our commitments. One way forward is to establish a permanent advocacy network to give the Pact unconditional, sustained political support. To this end, I propose the creation of a global forum for the future, an inclusive movement of states committed to multilateralism, mutual respect, and the defense of our shared vision. A movement determined to stand up for the Pact and drive its implementation at every level. As states consider how to implement the Pact for the future, some solutions may be seen as inconvenient today, but in the long run, ladies and gentlemen, they are not optional. They are systemically necessary. The first example is the reform of the Security Council. We all recognize that it is the principal organ entrusted with the maintenance of international peace and security. But what it is not, and must never be, is a body that stands above international law to defend the interests of some at the expense of others. Jus cogens norms must be safeguarded as a matter of principle. If the prohibitions against genocide and crimes against humanity are accepted as jus cogens norms, can any permanent member claim a legitimate veto right in such circumstances? Member states have attempted to address this question through many reform proposals, but with minimal progress. This is why we must dare to go further now. We, the General Assembly, must take a bold step and request an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on this very question. Second, we must confront the gap between our words and actions on gender equity. Progress has been made, but far too modestly. Over the past 80 years, 13% of leaders in multilateral organizations have been women. And no woman has ever served as Secretary General of the United Nations. And this, ladies and gentlemen, must change. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let us make history. Today, the 80th session of the General Assembly is led by only the 5th woman to hold the presidency. By the end of this session, she would be joined by a Madam Secretary General-elect, a living proof to 4 billion women that even the most impossible job is not beyond their reach. But gender representation is not enough. What we must achieve is actual gender equity because it benefits not only women and girls, but entire societies. True equity requires systemic change, And so women's empowerment must remain at the heart of our global agenda. International organizations must wave a gender perspective into every strand of policy making. And that should be a result of effective participation of women and girls themselves. Electing a Madam Secretary General would be historic, but it must only be the beginning of a much deeper transformation. Madam President, the Pact for the Future sets out clearly what must be done to change our world for the better. I have mentioned only two of the many challenges we must confront decisively. But we can only succeed as a community if we accept that there is no future for humanity without a fundamental change. The mandate of the Global Forum for the Future would be to push towards such a change. This is why it must be inclusive. It must not be merely a coalition of countries. It must inspire hundreds of millions of people. For when it comes to human dignity, the constituency of like-minded individuals is vast, diverse, and knows no borders. Human dignity is indivisible. We must fight for it no matter how great the obstacles are. And there are many, we know that. Think of hunger. Time and again, humanity rose across continents to confront the scourge of hunger, to no avail. Worse still, hunger is now being weaponized, turned into a tool of war. We receive reports on a daily basis of how women and children are starved because they are marked as legitimate targets, as enemies. How cruel, how inhumane is that, ladies and gentlemen? We cannot allow this to happen any longer. 40 years ago, musicians stood against hunger. Instead of guns, they, the Band 8, used music. The world heard them, but they were not loud enough, as hunger has not been eradicated. Today, we have science. We can address on a scale beyond imagination not only hunger, but every act of violence against human beings and all human fears. Granted, science, technology, and global connectivity are too often twisted by cynical leaders and warmongering regimes. But they can also be harnessed for the common good. Artists, influencers, and visionaries with audiences of millions can join forces with the governments of like-minded nations. Together, their voice in defense of humanity could become irresistible. Together, we can demand real action by all governments, all world and community leaders on the Pact for the Future, and hold to account those who betray human dignity to its very core, through wars of aggression, genocidal policies, and crimes against humanity. If we join forces and make ourselves heard, nobody can ignore us, not even the most arrogant governments and individual politicians. Of course, such initiatives cannot emerge out of thin air. They require leadership, strong, inclusive, and fearless leadership. We, the leaders of today, are only transient custodians of power. Some of us may not be here after the next election, but that is precisely why we must act now. Our responsibility and destiny will be judged by how we treat our planet and its people today. We simply cannot afford silence, ignorance, or passivity, not while we hold power and possess the power of the word. Hesitation is not an option, Madam President. For most of us, members of the UN, is not might that makes right. It is the opposite. We must not allow the powerful few to ignore us. We must not surrender to a world where power alone prevails. We, the majority of United Nations members, must be role models. We must work for a different world. The Global Forum for the Future can be a platform for the much-needed transformation in which partnerships with non-state actors and companies are indispensable. Profits must finally serve development for all. Innovation and sustainability must drive tolerance, mutual respect, and inclusive dialogue. Is that too much to ask? If we, the leaders of this planet, can offer nothing but terror, conflict, pollution, fear, inequalities and war to 8 billion people, then we must confront the truth. We are complicit in crimes against our civilization and our planet. And not just us, heads of states, but leaders of international institutions, CEOs and every individual with the power to make a difference share this responsibility. None of us can claim ignorance of what is at stake. If we believe in human dignity for all, we must deliver more. A world that fulfills lives, not threatens them. We must say yes to inclusive multilateralism and a resounding no to multipolarism. Let us show that this General Assembly can and will make a difference, as it has often done before. Let us demonstrate that we reject arrogance, hatred, and willful blindness to a lack of equality and justice, to wars of aggression, crimes against humanity, and genocide, because they tear us apart for generations. And let us proclaim in all seriousness and sincerity that we embrace personal and collective responsibility to uphold humanity, sustainable development, and international law, because this will keep us together as a civilization for generations. And Madam President, let me end on a personal note. For the sake of future generations, to fulfill our responsibility as human beings, to ensure that we are on the right side of the history, we should do the right thing. We did not stop the Holocaust. We did not stop the genocide in Rwanda. We did not stop the genocide in Srebrenica. We must stop the genocide in Gaza. There are no excuses anymore. None. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Slovenia. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Kasim Jomart Tokayev, the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished delegates, for 8 decades, the United Nations has played a pivotal role in combating humanity's global challenges. Over that time, it has led our common efforts on collective security, nuclear non-proliferation, peacekeeping, development, poverty reduction, sustainability, and human rights. But we must also face the truth. The world around us has changed profoundly and, unfortunately, not for the better. That's why the United Nations remains today a symbol of hope for millions around the globe. This historic meeting is a unique opportunity to recommit ourselves to the founding principles and goals of our universal and truly indispensable organization. However, we cannot turn a blind eye to the real crisis thrust in multilateral institutions. Serious violations of international law have become new normality, which undermines global stability and erodes confidence between peoples, between political leaders, and between states. In this challenging time, we all must empower the United Nations to make it more adjustable to the realities of today's unpredictable world. The spirit of mutual understanding and eagerness to cooperate must prevail over dangerous warmongering. State leaders have a responsibility to move toward making peace. A failure of the current generation of leaders to act is not an option, because future generations will pay a much greater price. In this regard, comprehensive reform of the United Nations is a strategic necessity, not a subject for endless contemplations. We need to establish a new group of truly dedicated people who will highly professionally and without any hesitations make concrete proposals for reforming the United Nations to make it better suited to the challenges of today and objectives of tomorrow. A central pillar of this bold effort to renew the United Nations should be a reform of the Security Council. Major powers of Asia, Africa, and Latin America should be represented in the Security Council on the rotational basis. In addition, Kazakhstan strongly believes that the voices of responsible middle powers also need to be seriously amplified in the Security Council. In fact, they have already started to play a larger positive role in international relations, bringing balance and building trust. They can act as bridges within the United Nations when major powers are divided or failing to resolve pressing issues of common concern. Above all, a credible United Nations for the 21st century requires member states to take concrete steps toward durable peace and security. Otherwise, the United Nations is doomed to forever mitigate consequences while root causes forever proliferate. We can begin this process already today by reaffirming our steadfast commitment to the Charter of the United Nations. The founding principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and peaceful resolution of disputes must be upheld without exception. Selective application of the Charter undermines its credibility. The world needs a new consensus based on trust, inclusiveness, and shared responsibility. For example, the enemy state clauses of the Charter, historical remnants of the Second World War, have already been recognized by the overwhelming majority of the international community is obsolete. For all these reasons, it's time to have a serious conversation about Charter review. Today we face an alarming reality. Arms control treaties are collapsing, and with them, so are the foundations of strategic stability. Global military spending in 2024 hit a record $2.7 trillion. The global cost of violence reached nearly $20 trillion. Therefore, rebuilding a robust global security architecture should remain a top priority for the international community. We advocate relaunching high-level dialogue among nuclear powers and stronger multilateral action to drastically reduce the looming threat of nuclear weapons. More widely, we must begin the hard work of getting rid of the militant mindset. We can do so by tracking closely how much our countries invest in peace. Kazakhstan is ready to host a new dialogue on nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. We can focus on informal, inclusive exchanges that reinforce the NPT and support progress toward the CTBT. We also call to advance our proposal to establish International Agency for Biological Safety and Security. Kazakhstan remains concerned by the Ukrainian crisis, which continues to seriously harm civilians, damage global trust, and undermine international security. Nonetheless, bilateral and international diplomatic efforts on this conflict should continue along with political flexibility to meet the long-term interests of both states. Territorial disputes are never easy to resolve and require mutual restraint and responsibility for the sake of future generations. The psychology of animosity drags all involved in conflicts to the abyss, leaving no chance to reach peace. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza has reached a disastrous scale that cannot be ignored. This conflict stems from a complex historical background. We cannot ignore the root cause of this belligerence. Kazakhstan calls for full protection of all civilians and unhindered humanitarian access in strict compliance with international humanitarian law. We reaffirm our support of the two-state solution, with the United Nations playing a central role. Kazakhstan acknowledges diplomatic initiatives aimed at regional reconciliation in the Middle East, including the Arab Peace Initiative, the New York Declaration, and the Abraham Accords, and others. They demonstrate that leadership and political will can turn division into cooperation and shared benefit. We also welcome the normalization of relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia under the mediation of the United States President. It shows that even entrenched conflicts can be settled through diplomacy and common sense. Guided by this principle, Kazakhstan consistently favors diplomacy over escalation and dialogue over force. Current geopolitical tensions sometimes tempt some leaders to claim that a clash of civilizations is inevitable. Yet, these divisions are not fact or fate. They are political choices. Global public goods such as science, medicine, sports, religion, and culture should not become subjects of geopolitical divisions and sanctions. These spheres of human activity bind us together under a humanitarian umbrella. When political leaders make irresponsible statements or take reckless decisions, manipulating religion and identity for political gain, they in fact seriously damage the trust and goodwill in striving for peace. Political leadership must be rooted in mutual understanding and respect, not mutual suspicion and arrogance. Tolerance and wisdom are the foundation of lasting peace and must be upheld through the rule of law. Dear friends and colleagues, we observe a growing fragmentation and political bias of investment flows. As a result, Global FDI fell to $1.5 trillion last year. Kazakhstan strongly advocates for greater international investment cooperation. More than $400 billion have been attracted to our economy within 30 years of independence. Our commitment to open market principles is absolutely firm and will remain a cornerstone of our state policy. Located in the very center of Eurasia, Kazakhstan is poised to play a crucial role as a logistic hub, handling 80% of all overland transit between Asia and Europe. We are investing tens of billions of dollars in our transport and transit infrastructure, including the Belt and Road Initiative, the North, South, and Trans-Caspian transit corridors. Kazakhstan will continue to develop regional supply chains that are the heart of the emerging global transport network. By 2029, we plan to build 5,000 kilometers of new railway lines. Kazakhstan has made the Sustainable Development Goals a core pillar of its national agenda, integrating their targets into state planning and budgeting. With the support of the United Nations Secretary General and partner states, Kazakhstan now hosts the new United Nations Regional Center for SDGs for Central Asia and Afghanistan in Almaty. Today, Central Asia is demonstrating a renewed sense of unity and mutual trust. It is emerging as a proactive contributor to international peace and progress. The Central Asian Five are strengthening cooperation, proving that regional solidarity can be a powerful force for development and security. This has enabled our region to engage key global partners in the unique Central Asia Plus dialogue format. Kazakhstan believes that inclusive development in Afghanistan is a basis for long-term regional peace and stability. We continue to support the Afghan people through humanitarian assistance and cooperation in trade, food security, infrastructure, and transport connectivity. Distinguished delegates, last year was the hottest year in human history, and Central Asia is warming at twice the global rate. The melting of glaciers in the Alatau Mountains is accelerating, multiplying threats to water and food security for millions. Kazakhstan has drawn profound lessons from the tragedy of the Aral Sea. Thanks to our consistent efforts, including at the international level, we succeeded in preserving the northern part of the sea. As the current chair of the International Fund for Saving the Aral Sea, Kazakhstan will continue to play a proactive role in this common priority. Meanwhile, the Caspian Sea is rapidly shrinking. It is no longer just a regional concern. It is a global warning signal. Therefore, we call for urgent steps to preserve the Caspian water resources with our partners across the region and the wider international community. Last year, Kazakhstan co-organized the One Water Summit with France, Saudi Arabia, and the World Bank. Looking forward, stronger coordination, investments, and sustainable solutions are urgently needed to prevent future water crises. To help advance this agenda, Kazakhstan will host a regional ecological summit in Astana in April next year to be convened in partnership with the United Nations and other international organizations. As part of our broader environmental commitment, Kazakhstan is implementing a nationwide Clean Kazakhstan campaign. This national movement mobilizes millions of volunteers in cleanup actions, waste reduction, and eco-education. At this initiative of Kazakhstan, the United Nations declared 2026 the International Year of Volunteers for Sustainable Development. We invite all member states to collaborate on this important endeavor. In this spirit, I propose that the General Assembly adopt a resolution proclaiming April 22 as the International Day of Greening the Planet. Dear friends, Kazakhstan views artificial intelligence not as one more technological advancement, but as a major breakthrough that can be a true engine of human progress. Yet, as artificial intelligence accelerates, so do the related risks, specifically deepening technological, economic, and geopolitical divides. At the same time, we should not let ethical norms fall behind this rapid evolution. Pressing questions of fairness, accountability, and individual rights must be addressed with clarity and urgency. We must act collectively to ensure that every country can benefit from AI. Kazakhstan welcomes the establishment under UN auspices of the Global Dialogue on AI Governance. We stand ready to actively contribute to this platform to help ensure that AI remains safe, inclusive, and human-centered. In Kazakhstan, artificial intelligence will be integrated across all sectors of economy and public services. The basic infrastructure to deliver this plan is being built, and our bright young people are getting ready to turn this vision into reality. Our strategic goal is to transform Kazakhstan into a fully digital power within the next 3 years. Large-scale digitalization and widespread use of AI have become a national priority in Kazakhstan. E-government is an important pillar of our national development strategy. Around 90% of public services are already digitalized. Kazakhstan has recently launched its fastest national supercomputer ever. But AI and automation are expected to threaten jobs in many countries. That's why digital progress must go hand in hand with professional education. Therefore, Kazakhstan believes it is imperative not just to increase employment, but to valorize the technical professions. Ladies and gentlemen, amid global turbulence, Kazakhstan is pursuing a bold national renewal to build a truly just and fair state. Over the last 3 years, we have carried out large-scale political and economic reforms that are unprecedented in our part of the world. Through a national referendum, we introduced a single 7-year presidential term, thereby strengthening democratic accountability. We remain committed to the formula of strong president, influential parliament, and accountable government. Guided by strong wish to modernize Kazakhstan, I have proposed a single-chamber parliament for a national referendum to consider. Our objective is to continuously embrace the political system to make it more transparent, effective, and reflective of people's aspirations. At the heart of these reforms lies a clear principle: law and order must prevail. We believe that only governance rooted in common sense and the rule of law can ensure public order and protect the rights of all citizens. It creates good conditions for international investment, trade, cooperation, and more broadly, the dynamic development of our country. The interests of law-abiding people and decent citizens must always come first, maintained through justice, accountability, and mutual respect. Kazakhstan's economy is showing clear signs of sustainability and resilience. This year, economic growth is expected to exceed 6%, underscoring the sustainability of our economy as the largest in our part of the world. But we are not complacent. We will continue our efforts to ensure a long-term growth. Kazakhstan's energy strategy is based on 4 pillars: oil and gas, coal, uranium, and critical minerals. These precious assets are the basis of reliable energy partnerships. Climate change and the green agenda cannot be accepted by all countries that have huge deposits like coal, which nowadays can be cleaned up by advanced technologies. That's why we have committed to decarbonize our country in 35 years. Renewable energy is not the single solution to all energy problems. Agriculture is another driver of our development with huge potential for global markets. Kazakhstan's grain export capacity has amounted to 12 million tons, reaching a great number of international markets, creating new opportunities for trade expansion using enhanced transport connectivity. We will continue our cooperation with all major international partners and regional stakeholders to further diversify our external trade and economy, making it more inclusive and resilient. Excellencies, we will remain firmly on this path, deepening governance reforms at home while supporting global governance abroad. Kazakhstan will continue to serve as a bridge builder and peacemaker. It will also continue to choose balance over domination, cooperation over confrontation, and peace over war. We stand ready in cooperation with other players, stakeholders in the international community to renew the promise of the United Nations as a beacon of peace, justice, and cooperation. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Thank you, President of the 80th session of the UN General Assembly, United Nations Secretary General, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, and ladies and gentlemen. 80 years ago, the United Nations was established to save succeeding generations of humanity from the scourge of war and to build a peaceful, prosperous, and just world arising from the devastation brought about by global conflict. Through the UN Charter, the nations of the world pledge to uphold peace, development, and human rights, which would be underpinned by international law. Now more than ever, we are called upon to uphold the values and advance the purpose of the United Nations. We are also called upon to advance cooperation and solidarity between nations. We are called upon to promote multilateralism and safeguard the institutions that enable it. South Africa's engagement in the international sphere echoes our domestic imperatives of eradicating poverty, reducing unemployment, and addressing the root causes of inequality. Our foreign policy is guided not only by the needs of our people, but also those of the continent of Africa and the global South. Inspired by our own history, South Africa strives to maintain world peace and also the settlement of all international disputes through negotiation and dialogue and not through war. We therefore welcome the strong partnership between the African Union and the United Nations in promoting peace, security, and stability on the African continent. This year, South Africa is honored to preside over the G20. This is the first time that G20 Leaders Summit will be held on the African continent, the cradle of humanity. South Africa's G20 presidency is guided by the theme equality, solidarity, and sustainability. To give full meaning to our theme of equality, solidarity, and sustainability, we have invited the G20 countries to join us in prioritizing the following areas. Firstly, in discussion to strengthen disaster resilience and response by addressing the increasing frequency and impact of climate-induced natural disasters. Secondly, to ensure that we have debt sustainability for low-income countries by crafting innovative ways to support countries to have low levels of debt to maintain economic stability. Thirdly, to discuss how to mobilize finance for a just energy transition by encouraging investments in renewable energy and sustainable technologies, without foregoing what we would call base load energy sources. Fourthly, by harnessing critical minerals for inclusive growth and sustainable development through the value addition processes, that is, beneficiation of these minerals at the source where the minerals are extracted, to foster the development of communities where these minerals are found. These priorities reflect South Africa's commitment to addressing global challenges and promoting inclusive growth and sustainable development. Our country's G20 presidency is a significant opportunity for South Africa to advocate for Africa's development agenda and to amplify African voices in global economic governance for a continent that is irreversibly on the rise. As member states of the United Nations, we have all adopted the Sustainable Development Goals. However, many of these goals remain elusive. There are many reasons that hold many countries back from fulfilling and implementing these development goals. Some of these reasons are lack of sufficient financial resources that can finance the advance that these countries need to make to fulfill those goals. Many countries with developing economies, especially in Africa and the global South, do not have adequate capital to finance their development goals. They are indebted and are paying much more on debt servicing than they do on health and education. In fact, these countries pay much more than countries in the North for their debt. Yet through global solidarity, by having fairer lending rules, especially for several of the global South countries, we can achieve our shared commitment. Through the G20 process, we are working towards building consensus on how this problem can be tackled, including the reform of international financial institutions, particularly multilateral development banks, to better tackle global challenges that many countries face. The multilateral trading system needs to be reformed as we reconfirm that the World Trade Organization remains the only multilateral body that is capable of managing differences and coordinating positions in global trade. Trade is one of the most important instruments to mobilize domestic resources for development. It is concerning that geopolitical shocks and unprecedented trade policy volatility are destabilizing the global economy and jeopardizing a critical source of development finance. In fact, trade is now being used as a weapon against a number of countries in the world. We must redouble our efforts to strengthen the link between trade and development. Unilateral trade practices and economic cohesion have a detrimental impact on many nations. This includes the economic embargo against Cuba, which has caused untold damage to the country's economy over the years. This unfair embargo must be lifted, and we want it lifted sooner rather than later. In the midst of global trade uncertainty, the African continent is providing a pragmatic example of constructive collaboration and cooperation by using the African Continental Free Trade Area as an engine for sustainable growth and development. This will, with commitment, become the central pillar of economic cooperation and integration for our continent. As part of the effort to build more inclusive economies, South Africa's G20 presidency has launched an extraordinary committee of independent experts on global wealth inequality. This committee, chaired by Professor Joseph Stiglitz, a Nobel laureate, will deliver the first ever report on global inequality to G20 leaders when they meet in November in Johannesburg in South Africa. Climate change is an existential threat. We are failing future generations by our inability to reduce global warming. Climate change is reversing economic growth and development gains in many countries, especially in the global south. Although Africa carries the least responsibility for climate change, many countries on the continent of Africa experience much of its harshest effects. Extreme weather events like floods and droughts are driving food insecurity, displacing populations, causing damage to infrastructure, and leading to the unnecessary loss of livelihoods. Member states must honor their undertakings and commitments in line with the guiding principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. The Secretary General recently reported that global military expenditure has reached historic highs, just as the world is falling behind on its core development promises. We are building weapons when we should be building social infrastructure that advance the lives of our people. We are fighting wars that cause death and destruction when we should be fighting poverty and developing the livelihoods of vulnerable people. We must act decisively to silence all the guns everywhere to realize the goal of sustainable development and global peace. And I do believe that this is an objective that is possible to reach. As we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the UN, the relevance of this institution and various multilateral processes for the maintenance of international peace and security is being willfully undermined. There is an increasing reliance on unilateral military action in contravention of international law. The United Nations Security Council has proven to be ineffective in its current form and composition in carrying out its charter mandate to maintain international peace and security. South Africa remains deeply concerned by the erosion of the credibility of the Security Council and its failures to ensure accountability and uphold international law. As the security and humanitarian situations in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Sudan, Gaza, and elsewhere deteriorate, it is a matter of great concern that there are countries that continue to violate international law and also defy the United Nations resolutions and rulings, also from bodies like the International Court of Justice. The establishment of the Hague Group and the Madrid Group aim to reaffirm the primacy of international law, promoting accountability and ensuring support for a just peace. We cannot and should not accept that members of this organization continue willfully to violate without consequence the charter that we have all agreed to uphold. Therefore, as nations that have pledged to uphold the UN Charter, we have the ultimate responsibility to ensure and protect the rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination, consistent with the case that South Africa brought before the International Court of Justice. There is growing global consensus. There is growing global consensus that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Just last week, the United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry found that Israel is responsible for the commission of genocide in Gaza. As Palestinians continue to face genocide and famine, we have a duty to act. South Africa has acted in the interest of saving lives by insisting that the International Court of Justice should make a ruling that indeed genocide is being committed in Gaza and that it should stop. And we stand here to say it must stop. We welcome the historic high-level meeting held yesterday on the two-state solution yesterday in this very chamber. This reflects the determination of the global majority, a global majority that now stands at 142 and more countries, that Palestinians deserve a peaceful state alongside a peaceful Israel. Many nations in the world are calling for that, and that is the voice that we believe that Israel should heed, and those powerful nations that can make a two-state solution viable and possible and implementable should act in that regard. The long overdue announcement by increasing number of countries to recognize the state of Palestine is testament to this determination. We have a responsibility as the member states of the United Nations to reaffirm the right also of self-determination of the people of Western Sahara. The very first resolution of the United Nations General Assembly in January of 1946 called for the elimination of atomic weapons. The resolution was passed shortly after the catastrophic use of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki that killed thousands of people. Decades later, we have not made significant progress in the fulfillment of the commitment to nuclear disarmament. In 2026, next year, South Africa will be presiding over the first review conference of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. This treaty reaffirms that there is no greater assurance of non-proliferation than the complete prohibition of nuclear weapons. I was glad to hear that a number of leaders stood here to speak against nuclear weapons and the use thereof. This year we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action as a roadmap for the achievement of gender equality, the empowerment of the women and girls of the world. South Africa reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the empowerment of women and their full, equal, and meaningful participation in all spheres of life. Yes, we would support also the election of a female Secretary General of the United Nations. The Beijing conference milestone reminds us of our shared responsibility to advance human rights, dignity, and justice for all. We are all equal, men and women, and there is no reason that we continue to hold the women of the world backwards. The right to development must be central to the policies and operational activities of the United Nations and its specialized agencies, programs, as well as funds. It must be at the core of the policies and strategies of the international financial and multilateral trading systems. As we celebrate 80 years of the United Nations, we must seize the opportunity to build a better United Nations for the next 80 years. What is needed now is a stronger and more capable United Nations, a United Nations that is based on the renewed commitment to its founding principles. We must invigorate the negotiations on the Security Council reform at the intergovernmental negotiations in the General Assembly, including by initiating text-based negotiations. The Security Council must be accountable. It must also be representative. It must be democratic and effective in executing its mandate. We can no longer accept that a large portion of the world's population is not represented in the United Nations Security Council. My own continent, Africa, home to 1.4 billion people, as well as South America, are not represented in the United Nations Security Council. This is unjust, this is unacceptable, and it must end. We want representation in the Security Council. We look forward to working with the Secretary General on the UN 80 initiative to ensure that our organization works more effectively and efficiently. Mandates given by member states must be implemented, and the necessary structural changes and program realignment must be implemented across the UN system. In the face of the decrease in funding to the United Nations to fulfill its mandate, the UN 80 initiative is important to maintain the integrity of the multilateral system and to uphold international law. Lastly, I am reminded that our collective membership of the United Nations is our shared humanity in action. The United Nations at 80 compels us to reflect on our collective achievements and to chart a way forward, building an organization that is able to address our common challenges. We must rise to the occasion and do our utmost together to ensure the political, economic, and social freedom of all humanity. We must reaffirm that freedom is indivisible and that the denial of the rights of one person diminishes the freedom of all of us. We must reaffirm the equal dignity and worth of every person and must therefore leave no one behind and no country behind. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of South Africa. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Shavkat Mirziyoyev, President of the Republic of Uzbekistan. I request Protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Hurmatli rais xonimlari, hurmatli bosh kotib janoblari, delegatsiya rahbarlari, xonimlar va janoblar. Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkiloti Bosh Assambleyasining yubiley anjumani 80-sessiyasi bilan sizlarni qutlashdan mamnunman. Bugungi yig'ilishimiz shiddat bilan o'zgarayotgan murakkab global vaziyatda o'tmoqda. Bu esa tashkilotimiz faoliyati va uning kelajagiga yangicha yondashuvlar va bilan qarashga chorlamoqda. Hozirgi kunda dunyoda xalqaro institutlarning o'rni va roli zaiflashmoqda. Qarama-qarshilik, nizo va urushlar kuchaymoqda. Texnologik va ijtimoiy tengsizlik keskin oshmoqda. Iqtisodiy va gumanitar inqirozlar ortib bormoqda. Bularning hammasi mutlaqo yangi xavotirli geosiyosiy voqelikning vujudga keltirmoqda. Biz bosh kotib Antonio Guterres janob olilarining tashkilotimizning eng og'ir va o'tkir global masalalarni murosa bilan hal etish uchun asosiy platforma sifatida saqlab qolishga qaratilgan sa'y-harakatlarini yuksak baholaymiz. Bu borada BMT 80 tashabbuslarini to'liq qo'llab-quvvatlaymiz. Kelajak uchun paktga qat'iy sodiqligimizni tasdiqlaymiz. Biz zamonaviy xavf-xatarlarni qarshi samarali kurashish, rivojlanayotgan davlatlarning manfaatlarini himoya qilish maqsadida Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkiloti Xavfsizlik kengashini transformatsiya qilish va uning tartibini kengaytirish tarafdorimiz. Hurmatli sessiya ishtirokchilari, biz barqaror rivojlanish maqsadlariga xomahang holda demokratik, huquqiy, ijtimoiy va dunyoviy yangi O'zbekistonni barpo etish siyosatini olib bormoqdamiz. Ortga qaytmas islohotlarimizning izchil davom ettiryapmiz. Ustuvor maqsadimiz mamlakatimizda yashayotgan har bir oilaning, har bir fuqaroning hayotini tubdan o'zgartirish, inson qadrini va farovonligini oshirishdir. So'nggi yillarda O'zbekistonda kambag'allik darajasi 35% dan 6.6% qisqartirishga erishdik. Bunga avvalo ta'lim va ilm-fan sohasini o'zgartirish, innovatsion tarmoqlar va texnologik sanoat korxonalarini barpo etish, yashil energetika va transport infratuzilmasini modernizatsiya qilish, kichik biznesni har tomonlama rivojlantirish va natijada millionlab ish o'rinlarini yaratish orqali erishmoqdamiz. Mamlakatimizda maktabgacha ta'lim qamrovi 27% dan 78%gacha oshdi. Yoshlarimizni oliy ta'lim bilan qamrovi esa 9% dan 42% ga yetdi. Eng asosiysi, o'qituvchi va ustozlik kasbining obro'si va nufuzini keskin oshirishga hal qiluvchi masala sifatida qaramoqdamiz. Pedagoglarning o'zaro tajriba va bilim almashish uchun yagona xalqaro platformani yaratish maqsadida O'zbekistonda butun jahon professional ta'lim sammitini o'tkazishni taklif etamiz. Shuningdek, mamlakatimizda ilg'or sog'liqni saqlash tizimini yaratmoqdamiz. Ertaga Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkiloti bosh qarorgohida tashabbusimiz bilan bolalar saratoni va boshqa og'ir kasalliklarga qarshi kurashga bag'ishlangan yuqori darajadagi tadbir o'tkaziladi. Unga barcha xorijiy hamkorlarimizni taklif etamiz. Yana bir muhim yo'nalish gender siyosati. Mamlakatimizning ijtimoiy, siyosiy va hayoti va tadbirkorlik sohasidagi xotin-qizlarning roli bundan buyon ham mustahkamlashni maqsad qilganmiz. Keng mintaqamiz miqyosida esa Osiyo xotin-qizlar forumini doimiy platformaga aylantirib, muntazam o'tkazib borish tarafdorimiz. Yana bir bor ta'kidlamoqchiman. Biz barqaror rivojlanish maqsadlariga erishish yo'lida olgan majburiyatlarimizga sodiqmiz. 2030-yilga borib daromadi o'rtadan yuqori bo'lgan mamlakatlar qatoriga kirishni niyat qilganmiz. Shu maqsadga ochiq va pragmatik siyosatimizni izchil davom ettiramiz. Hurmatli xonimlar va janoblar, bundan 8 yil muqaddam biz ushbu yuksak minbardan turib Markaziy Osiyoni tinchlik, yaxshi qo'shnichilik, sheriklik makoniga aylantirishga qat'iy qaror qilganimizni e'lon qilgan edik. Bugun chuqur mamnuniyat bilan ta'kidlash mumkinki, biz bu strategik maqsadga erishdik. Yopiq chegaralar, hal etilmagan bahs va nizolar davri tarixda qoldi. So'nggi yillarda mintaqamizda o'zaro savdo, investitsiyalar va transport tashuvlari hajmi 5 barobargacha ko'paydi. Biz qo'shma investitsiya jamg'armalari, chegara hududlarda savdo va sanoat zonalari, yirik infratuzilma loyihalarini amalga oshirmoqdamiz. Markaziy Osiyo davlat rahbarlari maslahat uchrashuvlari mintaqaviy integratsiyani chuqurlashtirish yo'lida samarali mexanizmga aylanganini ham umumiy yutug'imiz sifatida e'tirof etamiz. Shuni qat'iy ishonch bilan aytishim mumkinki, bugungi kunda yangi Markaziy Osiyoni shakllantirish jarayoni boshlandi. Mintaqamiz o'zining hamjihatligi, barqarorligini o'ziga xosligi bilan xalqaro munosabatlar tizimida alohida subyekt sifatida tobora mustahkam o'rin egallanmoqda. Maqsadlarimizga erishish uchun barcha xorijiy sheriklarimiz bilan o'zaro manfaatli aloqalarni kengaytirishga asosiy e'tibor qaratganmiz. Bu borada Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkiloti tuzilmalari bilan mintaqamizda qator yangi loyiha va dasturlarni amalga oshirishni taklif etamiz. Jumladan, ECOSOS va UNCTAD shafeligida Markaziy Osiyo davlatlarining iqtisodiy taraqqiyotini masalalariga bag'ishlangan xalqaro forum o'tkazish, UNIDO bilan sanoatda yashil texnologiyalar mintaqaviy hubini tashkil etish, mintaqamizda suv resurslaridan oqilona foydalanish, yashil makon barpo etish hamda demografik barqarorlikka erishish bo'yicha dasturlarni qabul qilish tashabbuslari bilan chiqamiz. Shu bilan birga Bosh assambleyaning Markaziy Osiyo mamlakatlarining mintaqaviy sheriklik va iqtisodiy integratsiyani chuqurlashtirish harakatlarini qo'llab-quvvatlashga doir rezolyutsiyasini qabul qilish taklif etamiz. Hurmatli delegatsiya rahbarlari, global va mintaqaviy xavfsizlik va barqaror rivojlanish haqida gapirganda albatta Afg'oniston to'g'risida to'xtalmaslik mumkin emas. Afg'on xalqining tinch va osuda hayotga bo'lgan intilishini qo'llab-quvvatlash uchun xalqaro hamjamiyat sa'y-harakatlarini birlashtirishi zarur. Shuni alohida ta'kidlashni istardimki, bu davlatning yakkalanib qolishiga yo'l qo'ymaslik o'ta muhimdir. Biz Afg'onistonda katta iqtisodiy va infratuzilma loyihalarini amalga oshirmoqchimiz. Ushbu mamlakat orqali xalqaro transport va energetika koridorlarini rivojlantirish bo'yicha tashkilotimizning alohida rezolyutsiyasini qabul qilishni taklif etamiz. G'azo sektoridagi tobora keskin yomonlashib borayotgan gumanitar inqirozni ham e'tibordan chetda qoldirib bo'lmaydi. Harbiy harakatlarni to'xtatish va siyosiy muzokaralarni davom ettirishga chaqiramiz. Biz BMTning rezolyutsiyasiga muvofiq ikki xalq uchun ikki davlat tamoyilini amalga oshirishning qat'iy tarafdorimiz. Ukraina atrofidagi vaziyat ham barchamizning jiddiy tashvishga solmoqda. Bu muammoning diplomatik yo'llar bilan hal etish bo'yicha yuqori darajadagi muloqotlar boshlanganini olqishlaymiz. Hurmatli anjuman ishtirokchilari, Markaziy Osiyoda global aksilterror strategiyasini bajarish bo'yicha samarali ishlar olib borilmoqda. BMTning terrorizmga qarshi kurash boshqarmasi bilan hamkorlikda reabilitatsiya va qayta integratsiya masalalari bo'yicha mintaqaviy kengash tuzilgan. Biz uni xalqaro kompetensiyalar markaziga aylantirishni taklif etamiz. Bu tuzilma muammoli hududlardan qaytarilgan shaxslarni tinch hayotga moslashtirish bo'yicha tajriba almashish uchun muhim platforma bo'lib xizmat qiladi. Bundan tashqari, terrorizmga qarshi kurash boshqarmasining mintaqaviy ofisini O'zbekistonda ochish uchun zarur sharoit yaratishga tayyormiz. Hurmatli xonimlar va janoblar, bugungi tahdidlarga to'la dunyoda global transport tizimi naqadar zaif ekanligiga amin bo'layapmiz. Bu muammolar birinchi navbatda dengizga chiqish imkoniyati bo'lmagan rivojlanayotgan davlatlarning barqarorligiga salbiy ta'sir ko'rsatmoqda. Xalqaro tranzit koridorlarining xavfsizligini ta'minlash va samarali logistika zanjirlarini yaratish o'ta muhimdir. Shu borada barqaror rivojlanish maqsadlari uchun o'zaro transport bog'liqligining mustahkamlash global mexanizmini joriy etish vaqti keldi deb hisoblaymiz. Shuningdek, tobora o'tkir tus olayotgan iqlim o'zgarishi muammolariga ham alohida to'xtalmoqchiman. Jumladan Orol dengizini qurishini salbiy oqibatlarining jahon hamjamiyatining doimiy diqqat markazida bo'lishi lozim. Biz Orol bo'yi ekotizimining qayta tiklash bo'yicha ishlarni izchil davom ettiryapmiz. So'nggi yillarda dengizning qurigan tubida 2 million gektar maydonda sho'rga chidamli cho'l o'simliklari ekildi. 2030-yilgacha ushbu hududning 80% qismida yashil qoplamalar hosil qilinadi. Yana bir muhim muammo bu suv resurslarining taqchilligidir. Hozirda dunyo aholisining 2 milliarddan ortig'i toza ichimlik suvidan foydalanish imkoniyatiga ega emas. Biz mamlakatimizda suvni tejash bo'yicha butun jahon forumini o'tkazishni rejalashtirganmiz. Mazkur anjuman yakunlari bo'yicha suv inqirozini barqaror taraqqiyot uchun jiddiy tahdid sifatida belgilash mo'ljallanmoqda. Bu borada global darajada innovatsiya texnologiyalarini joriy etish uchun alohida yo'l xaritasini qabul qilish niyatdamiz. Ekologik o'zgarishlarning yana bir salbiy ko'rinishi iqlim migratsiyasining kuchayib borayotganidir. Afsuski ushbu yo'nalishda aniq xalqaro mexanizmlar va huquqiy baza hanuzgacha yaratilmagan. Biz bu jiddiy masalaga keng xalqaro sheriklik va muvofiqlashtirilgan siyosat yuritish bo'yicha global pakt qabul qilish tarafdorimiz. Hurmatli yig'ilish ishtirokchilari, mamlakatlar o'rtasida raqamli rivojlanish va sun'iy intellektdan foydalanishda tengsizlikning oldini olish juda muhim ahamiyatga ega. Sog'liqni saqlash, ta'lim va madaniyat sohalarida sun'iy intellektning amaliy yechimlari va modellarini beg'araz almashishga qaratilgan xalqaro hamkorlik mexanizm yaratishni taklif etamiz. Yana bir ustuvor masalaga alohida to'xtalmoqchiman. Ertangi kunimiz dunyoning taqdiri va farovonligi o'sib kelayotgan yosh avlod qo'lida. Yoshlarimizni qalbini va ongining tinchlik, gumanizm va do'stlik, o'zaro ishonch va hurmat bilan oliyjanob g'oyalari sindirish dolzarb vazifamizdir. Bu borada jahon yoshlarining tinchlik sari harakatining ta'sis etish va uning qarorgohini O'zbekistonda joylashtirish taklifini ilgari suramiz. Biz jamiyatimizdagi bag'ri kenglik siyosatini izchil amalga oshirmoqdamiz. Shu bilan birga islom ma'rifati g'oyalarini chuqur o'rganish va dunyoga targ'ib etish bo'yicha sa'y-harakatlarimizni faol davom ettiramiz. Yaqin oylarda keng mintaqamiz uchun noyob bo'lgan islom sivilizatsiya markazini ochamiz. Buyuk ajdodlarimiz, mutafakkir allomalar Imom Buxoriy, Imom Termiziy, Imom Matrudiy boy ma'naviy va ilmiy merosining alohida taqdimotini Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkilotida o'tkazish niyatdamiz. Hurmatli xonimlar va janoblar, yangi O'zbekiston barcha davlatlar bilan o'zaro hamjihatlik, ochiq muloqot va yaqin sheriklik tarafdoridir. Biz xalqlar, madaniyatlar va sivilizatsiyalar o'rtasidagi muloqotni mustahkamlash, umumbashariy maqsadlarni ro'yobga chiqarish yo'lida o'z hissamizni qo'shishga doim tayyormiz. E'tiborlaringiz uchun rahmat.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of Republic of Uzbekistan. We have heard the last speaker in the general debate for this meeting. The next plenary meeting to continue with the general debate will be held immediately following the adjournment of this meeting. The meeting is adjourned. The fifth plenary meeting of the General Assembly is called to order. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Hurel Suk Ukna, President of Mongolia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Эрхэм хүндэт чуулганы төлөөлөгчдөө, эрхэм хүндэт ерөнхий нэрийн бичгийн дарга, хатагтай ноёдоо, юуны өмнө нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллага үүсгэн байгуулагдсны түүхт 80 жилийн босгон дээр зохион байгуулагдаж буй энэхүү чуулганы даргын хариуцлагатай үргийг хүлээн авсан хатагтай Анна Лена Бербок танд чин сэтгэлийн баяр хүргэж чуулганы үйл ажиллагаанд өндөр амжилт хүсье. Тэртех 800-ны өмнө их эзэн Чингис хаан их Монгол улсыг байгуулж, монголчууд бидний өвөг дээдэс өрөнд орныг төрт ёс, хууль цаазын дор төвшөлтгөн, Евразийн өргөн удам нутагт Монголын их амар амгаланг цогцлоож, хүн төрлөختөн хөгжин дэвжих үндэс суурийг тавьсан түүхтэй юм. Энэхүү Монголын их амар амгалан өнөөгийн дэлхийн дахны инх тайван, доктортой байдлыг сахин хамгаалахын төлөөх хамтын хүчин чармаалтын үндэс суурь болох үс дэвшилтэд үзэл санааг агуулж байсан юм. Тэгвэл 8.10-ны тэртех дэлхийн дайны утаа замхраагүй, хүн төрлөختний төгшүүр арилаагүй байсан тэр цаг үед нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллага хэмээх их айл дайны дэлхийн их тайван аюулгүй байдлын баталгаа, дэлхийн улс орнуудын итгэл найдварын их өргөө болон сүндэрлэн болсон түүхтэй юм. Тэр цагаас хойш энэхүү байгууллага хүн төрлөختний зам мөрийг гэрэлтүүлж, улс орнууд инх таймнаар зэрэгцэн хамтдаа хөгжих итгэл найдварын гал галмт болон оршсоор ирлээ. Олон улсын найрамдал, олон улсын нөхцөл байдал хувьсамтгай бэрхшээл сорилтоор дүүрмэн хэвээр байгаа энэ цаг үед Ерөнхий Ассамблеийн 80-р чуулган ерөнхий санал шүүмжлийн сэдвийг хамтдаа хүчтэй 80 жил инх тайван, хөгжил дэвшил, хүний эрхийн төлөөх илүү сайхан ирээдүй хэмээн тодорхойлсныг бид талархан дэмжиж байна. Чухамдаа энэхүү сэдв нь нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын өнгөрсөн 80 жилийн ололт амжилт, алдаа оноог дүгнэн цэгнэж, үйл ажиллагаа нь түүний дүрм, олон улсын эрх зүйн зарчмуудын дагуу улам бүр бэхжүүлж, цаашид илүү тодорхой үр дүн гаргахын төлөө санал бодол, үйл хэрэгэ нэгтгэхэд биднийг уриалан дуудаж байна. Эрхэм хүндэт төлөөлөгчдөө, Монгол улс аливаа улсын тусгаар тогтнол бүрэн эрх, нутаг дэвсгэрийн бүрэн бүрэмтэн байдлыг хүндэтгэж, маргаантай асуудлыг эв зүгээр шийдвэрлэх, хүний эрх чөлөө дээдлэх, эрх тэгш, харилцан ашигтай хамтран ажиллах тухай нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын дүрм, нийтэд хөрлөөн зөвшөөрсөн олон улсын эрх хэмжээ зарчмыг тууштай баримтсаар ирсэн. Монгол улс нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын бүрэн эрхт гишүүнээр илссэн 1961 оноос хойш олон улсын инх тайван аюулгүй байдлыг бэхжүүлэхийн төлөөх нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын хүчин чармаалт, түүний дотор зэвсэг хураах, үл дэлгэрүүлэх санаачлагыг тууштай дэмжиж ирсэн бөгөөд өөрийн газар нутгийг цөмийн зэвсэггүй статустай болгон зарласан юм. Мөн зүүн хойд Азийн яриа хэлцээрийн механизм байгуулахыг ирмэлзэж нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын инхийг сахиулах ажиллагаанд оролцсон нийгэм эдийн засгийн хөгжил, үрээлэн буй орчин, уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтийн асуудаар хөгжлийн бодлого, зорилгоодыг ханган хэрэгжүүлэх чиглэлээр олон арван санал санаачлаг гарган бүх төвшөнд хамтран ажиллаж ирсэн билээ. Нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын ерөнхий нэрийн бичгийн дарга Антонио Гутерриш 2022 онд манай улсад ажиллахдаа Монгол улс бол зөрчил тэмцэлтэй дэлхийн ертөнцид инх тайвны бэлэг тэмдэг болсон улс хэмээн хэлсэн нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын үйл ажиллагаа түүний энхийн үйл хэрэгт Монгол улсын оруулсан хувь нэмэр хичээл зүтгэлийг өндөрөөр үнэлсэн явдал болсон юм а. Монгол улс өнгөрсөн 23 жилийн хугацаанд нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын энхийг сахиулах ажиллагаанд зэвсэгт хүчний алба хаагчдаа тасралтгүй илгээн дэлхийн нийтийн болон бүс нутгийн их тайван аюулгүй байдлын төлөөх үйл хэрэгт хувь нэмрээ оруулсаар ирлээ. Энэ хугацаанд нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын энхийг сахиулах 16 ажиллагаанд манай улсын 23,000 гаруй энхийг сахиулагчид оролцсон бөгөөд Монгол улс нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагыг энхийг сахиулах ажиллагаанд цэрэг цагдаа илгээгч 120 гаруй улсаас тогтмол эхний 20 дотор эрэмблэгдэж ирлээ. Мөн Монгол улс нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын энхийг сахиулах ажиллагаанд үүрэг гүйцэтгэх эмэгтэй цэргийн албан хаагчдын тоог үе шаттайгаар нэмэгдүүлэн 14% хүргэснийг нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын аюулгүй зөвлөлийн эмэгтэйчүүд, энх тайван, аюулгүй байдалд тогтоол батлагдсны 25 жилийн босгон дээр тэмдэглэн хэлэхэд бас таатай байна. Монгол улс таашаач даян дэлхийн энх тайван, аюулгүй байдлыг сахин хамгаалахад чиглэсэн нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын хүчин чармаалтыг тууштай дэмжин энхийг сахиулах үйлсэд идэвхтэй оролцох болно. Эрхэм хүндэт зочид төлөөлөгчдөө доктортой хөгжлийн 2030 хөтөлбөр дуусахаар болоход ердөө 5 жил үлдээд буй энэхүү шийдвэрлэх цаг үед доктортой хөгжлийн зорилтуудын хэрэгжилт дэлхийд дахинаа дөнгөж 17% байна. Тэгвэл доктортой хөгжлийн 2025 оны ихтгэл дурдсанаар Монгол улсын доктортой хөгжлийн зорилтуудын хэрэгжилт 66.7% хүрч нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын олон талт хамтын ажиллагааны индексээр 14-р байранд орсон бидний олон 10 жилийн хүчин чармаалтын үр дүн зохих амжилт юм а. Олон улсын хамтын нийгэмлэг гишүүн орнууд доктортой хөгжлийн зорилтуудыг хэрэгжүүлэхийн төвшинг нэмэгдүүлэхийн тулд бүхий л хүчин чармаалтаа дайчлан ажиллаж байна. Хэдхэн сарын өмнө Испани улсын Севилийн хотноо болсон хөгжлийн санхүүжилтийн асуудлаарх олон улсын 4-р хурлаар доктортой хөгжлийн зорилтуудын амин чухал асуудал бол санхүүжилт гэдэг дээр улс орнууд санал нэгдэж хөгжиж буй улс орнуудын оролцоог нэмэгдүүлэх, олон улсын санхүүгийн өнөөгийн бүтцийг шинжлэх талаар олон санаачлага гаргасныг хэрэгжүүлэхээр тогтсонд баяртай байна. Уг баг хурлаас баталсан Севилягийн үүрэг амлалт баримт бичгийг хэрэгжүүлэх ажлын хүрээнд олон улсын хөгжлийн хамтын ажиллагааг хамгийн хэрэгцээтэй нэн эмзэг бүлгийн хүмүүсийг дэмжин туслах, үүнтэй холбоотой сорилт бэрхшээлүүдийг шийдвэрлэхэд чиглүүлэх нь нэн чухал байна. Түүнчлэн Монгол улс нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын хүрээнд далаад гарцгүй хөгжиж байгаа орнуудын ашиг сонирхлыг хамгаалах, эдгээр улс орнуудын тусгай хэрэгцээ шаардлага, онцлог байдлыг олон улсын хамтын нийгэмлэг таниулах, тэдэнтэй хамтран эрх ашигаа хамгаалах, дэлхийн нийтэд дуу хоолойгоо хүргэх чиглэлээр идэвхтэй